In the United States, we have the FDA, the Food and Drugs Administration, which is a weird combination because the people that regulate heroin and meth are the ones that are also regulating avocados and bread. And the reason is that scientifically, there is not a single difference in the definition of food and drugs, because a food or a drug is anything you ingest that has a biochemical reaction within you, which every single thing we ingest will have it, from a glass of water to heroin, right? So basically drugs, as we understand them, or as most people understand them, are things that are ingested that in a very noticeable way altered our mind, our biochemistry negatively. That's the first thing that I invite people to consider. That
Nicolas Canon is a spiritual coach, author and speaker from Toronto, Canada. He weaves together ancestral wisdom, modern science and Eastern mysticism to guide folks from feeling lost, in pain and traumatized to feeling purpose, mastery and healed consciousness. With a positive approach to Ayahuasca, he offers coaching that blends spirituality with practical steps, helping people create meaningful, balanced lives.
there's a part of us that feels like we need to justify our worth or our life. But being useful is a way in which we justify our right to be alive. So basically, most high performance is shame, is functional impression. Grandiosity, which is usually what many men like this find themselves with, like, I'm the man. And this quest towards grandiosity, people don't understand that grandiosity is the other side of depression. It's the same coin, because depression is like, my life is worth nothing, why bother? Grandiosity is...
Nicolas, appreciate you joining me.
Thank you, Warren.
Now, I've consumed a fair bit of your Instagram. I seem to be an Instagram Reels person, and a lot of the stuff you're doing is actually really resonating with me. Your bio leads from crisis to courage. Can you give us a bit of a brief of what's gone on in your life to where you find yourself right now?
Okay, so I'm going to try to condense it. Long story short, I was born and raised in Colombia, a very traditional family, very, very protective. And that led to some set of complications. You know, it was the Pablo Escobar time, where one day you go to school, everything normal. The next day you come back and a couple of your classmates were missing. Some of them maybe never came back, or one of them will come back with half a face burnt in a glass eye because he happened to be walking next to a bombing from the cartels. So it was a time that it was pretty rough. And you can imagine parents, it would be easy for parents to be quite overprotective, and they have very good reasons. But as a child, you don't understand that. You think, why am I not allowed to go to the city, to go to the mall, to go play? And that bred a lot of control from my mother, a lot of suppression, which later on in my teenage years and in my early 20s expressed itself as kind of a rebellious attitude of drinking, drugs, parties, and trying to do everything that I felt I was not allowed to do in my childhood. Until at one point I found myself I was running my own business. I was making a lot of money. I was dating a woman with whom we had an open relationship. And somehow, even though I had reached the pinnacle of what I thought it meant to be a man, at least based on what people had shared with me, having the women, the money, I was taking steroids, so I was 200 pounds. I felt pretty empty. And as this relationship collapsed, I sunk with it at the beginning. And I went through a crisis. And at first I started spiraling out of control. But then I realized that there had to be something more, that it wasn't the life that I wanted to live, and that I wasn't proud of the man that I had become. And that led me towards a lot of different rites of passage for men, initiations, a spiritual journey, mostly by the hand of indigenous elders and ayahuasca. Where I realized that the crisis itself had been an initiation. It had been a way in which I was, if I was presented with the opportunity of taking inventory of my life, of realizing where I was out of integrity, where I had said yes to things that I meant to say no, and where I was living a life that was not truly mine. And I've dedicated my life ever since I had that transformation, moving from addiction, drugs, alcohol, and a lot of this crazy life to actually being of service, helping people, being fully clean and standing for a conscious way of living. So in my bio it says helping leaders move from crisis, turn crisis into the courage to live a life worth living. So because the crisis, the intensity of the emotions is not a problem. It's just fire. It's just a lot of energy that if we alchemize it into courage, we can actually create beautiful things with, and a life worth living, because not all lives are worth living, which is the second part of that, which means what is the life that, as a man, or the people that I work with, that it would be great to wake up to, or allow me to go to sleep at peace at night. And that's 34 years of who I am condensed into how I came to do the work that I do today, and why ayahuasca, and why the spiritual path as the segue into conscious living.
Thank you for sharing that. As you say, there's a lot condensed into it. Do you think, being able to move on toxic relationships, you talk about quitting addiction, changing careers, and you're now writing best-selling novels or books, restoring family bonds, getting married, all those sorts of things. Was it a build-up of negative energy, or was there a moment when you just said, that's it, I've got to change?
Yeah, there was a moment, but the moment is usually a build-up. Like a volcano, the explosion of a volcano is never just sudden. Sometimes it can be hundreds of years in the making, of slow tectonic shifts that eventually arrive to that point. And in my case, it was after my last breakup. I started drinking, partying. I was going on 5 Tinder dates per week. And I thought, now I'm free, I'm living the life. There was one day, back then I used to work as a tattoo artist, so I had my own studio, and most of the clients would pay cash. So I didn't even know how much money I had. I just had a plastic bag where people will pay a couple of $1,000 per tattoo of cash, and I would just put it in there. And every time that I wanted to party, I would just put my hand, and whatever I grabbed, that was the budget for the night. And there was this one day that I worked with a client. They paid me very well. They tipped me very well. And I remember just putting the money into the plastic bag of cash next to my desk. And I remember getting a message from one of the girls that I was dating. And in essence, I had a date lined up. I had a lot of money. And I just remember feeling completely empty, feeling completely, miserable. I felt like I thought I reached the pinnacle of what I was told I should chase. And in that moment I started asking myself, what am I doing with my life? What is this all there is to it? And it was paired with drinking a lot, being hangover. There were a couple of overdoses that I had in the months leading up to that. So all of these things amounted to one moment where I looked around, and on paper, it looked like I had a good life. But internally, I felt that this wasn't it, that something had to change.
You mentioned something has to change. What's the first step you take?
The first one was just that, having the humility to look at myself in the mirror and accept that something has to change, and that I don't know where to start. Because up until then, I'm the big man. I know what I'm doing. I had worked as a dating coach. I was in the self-development industry, so I knew a lot of tips and tricks and coaching frameworks. But I had to look in the mirror and recognize that I don't know. To arrive to that place of desperation and say, you know what, this isn't it, and I don't even know what I want. I don't know who I am. So that's always the first step, like being willing to put the pin in the map, in the GPS, the honest starting location. Because and I think most people never have enough courage to do that, because it can be scary to realize, I actually have no idea. I don't know if I like my life. I don't know if I like my partner. I don't know if I like my job. But that, having the honesty to look in the mirror and say, you know what, this isn't it, and I don't want to be here, and I don't even know where to start. I think that humility, and basically life bringing you to your knees, creates the vacuum for something else, for life to reach out in the form of a friend, in the form of a teacher of something. But that was the first step, just radical self-honesty.
You touch on ayahuasca. Like I've always been someone that's anti-drugs, played professional sport for over 10 years, tried to clean up my diet in terms of health, trying to not rely on big pharma to find natural remedies and hang on, I'm getting a sign from my body. Now that's changed and evolved for me. Started doing a bit of breath work. Ayahuasca, it really intrigues me.
Mm-hmm. So first, it's a common thing. I've spoken with many people, been in many podcasts with people that they say, drugs are not for me. I respect that. The first thing that I share with them is, are you aware why, for example, in the United States, we have the FDA, the Food and Drugs Administration, which is it's a weird combination, because the people that regulate heroin and meth are the ones that are also regulating avocados and bread. Right? Why is this? The people that are looking out for how much cocaine is allowed or not allowed into the country are the same ones that say, like, hey, like, these potatoes could come or not into the country. And the reason is that scientifically there is not a single difference in the definition of food and drugs, because a food or a drug is anything you ingest that has a biochemical reaction within you, which every single thing we ingest will have it, from a glass of water to heroin, right? So basically drugs, as we understand them, or as most people understand them, are things that are ingested that in a very noticeable way alter our mind, our biochemistry negatively. I would say that's more or less what we refer to as drugs. But even then, sugar acts just very similarly to cocaine, but is deregulated. Sugar is a heavy drug. Coffee was very regulated up until not too long ago. Alcohol, a very clear drug and toxin, and yet these are allowed. These are given a green pass, but there are other things that create an impact in our system, and actually a benign impact following up, but they're considered dangerous. And that's the first thing that I invite people to consider, that ayahuasca may be classified as a drug in many countries. In Colombia, it is not classified as such. It's considered ancestral heritage, ancestral medicine. So the idea of it being a drug is largely one of perspective, and very often a lack of information. Now, the second thing is a simple way to understand ayahuasca is, every time that we're suffering in our life, every time that we struggle, is because we cannot see clearly. If my business is struggling, it's because I'm not sure where the bottleneck is or what I need to do to take the next step. If my health is suffering, no matter what the tests show, the doctors cannot see very clearly what's the root, what's the cause, what needs to be addressed. If I'm arguing with my partner, with my wife, I cannot see very clearly what is it, what am I doing, what is she doing, what am I not doing that is creating the havoc. So the way that ayahuasca works, in my experience, is it's this plant that creates a lot of energy, and we did a lot of awareness, and it turns the lights on. So basically we go from kind of driving a little bit blind to seeing very, very, very clearly why our life is the way that it is, especially the parts that feel painful, and where the roots of that come. Because most of what we live in our relationships, in our business, in our health, is just symptoms. It's the expression of something much deeper, of stories we have about ourselves, of trauma that we have not fully integrated. So what ayahuasca does is it brings us to, very often at the beginning, very early childhood experiences that we may have forgotten. There's some people that they relieve pain, they relieve trauma from their birth or from their first 2-3 years of being alive, which most people don't have a conscious recollection of. But with ayahuasca, it's like the brain and the subconscious opens up. And then in that opening up, we can see actually the subtle threads that have been controlling and ruling our life without we knowing. An example of this, I used to drink a lot and party and take a lot of drugs. And I always thought I'm just being social. Everybody does it. No big deal. I have it under control. Many times I tried to quit because I thought maybe drinking a little too much, but it was those sober October, and then after we're celebrating with binge drinking or those little quick fixes, like people with their diets. And I thought, what's going on? Why can't I quit? If it's really under my control, why can't I just let it go for a year? What I realized was when I went to drink ayahuasca, which was after that breakup, I understood a couple of things and understood that the reason I was drinking and the reason that I was in a toxic relationship was the same. And it brought me all the way back to, I believe I was 4 or 5 years old, and my mother was being violent, which in Colombia was the norm. It was common. You beat up your children. That's how you raise them. So, but there were memories that I had forgotten that had happened. Later on, when I double checked with her, with my sisters, they had indeed happened, but they were so painful for me as a child that I brushed them aside. But I remember very clearly the day that I was running away from her. She caught me. She started beating me up, and I'm crying. Not because it's painful, the beat up. It was, she's like spanking me or whatnot. But more than the pain, it was feeling betrayed and feeling that love includes violence, and feeling that I'm unworthy of being cared for, because this woman gave me life and she's supposed to love me, and she's not taking good care of me. So there must be something wrong with me. So I must be unworthy of being cared for. And I realized that drinking was sustaining that story that, if I'm unworthy of being cared for, then fuck it. Then why should I care for myself? If the parents that gave me life were not care for me, why should I do it with myself? So with ayahuasca, it kind of takes you down memory lane, helps you revise these memories, purge them out of you. There's an element where you release, or you relieve yourself in a bucket, and you process. You gather the wisdom, the insight, being that my mom was expressing her own pain. I was going through my own thing, integrating that. Because once that was uprooted, once that came out of that with a lot of compassion, having cried the tears that as a child I couldn't cry, having felt the rage that as a child I was never allowed to have, and having done so in a safe space, then I felt at peace with my mother and with myself. And what happened as a side effect of that was that next time I came back home to Toronto, I tried to drink, and I took a sip of wine, and my whole body just contracted itself. And at first I thought maybe this is not good wine. Maybe I should buy a more expensive one. So I went across the street, bought myself a more expensive wine bottle. I thought this is gonna be it. Poured it, sipped it, and right away, I felt really, really, really bad. And I remember thinking, all right, there goes drinking. So ayahuasca allows for people to have enough clarity to find the roots of that which is creating a lot of problems in their life, to process it and to release it, so that we don't have to try to force change. Before, through the diets, through the sober October, through all these forced restrictions, I was trying to change something that was the symptom. It was not a problem. It was a symptom of something much deeper. That once addressed, then suddenly I lost all desire for drinking, for doing drugs, for even for partying and hanging out with the people that I used to. So that's a simple way of understanding how plant medicine works.
Tired of clunky crypto transactions, frozen accounts, and hidden bank fees? Meet Trustify, the Web3 platform that puts you in control. With Trustify, you can take control of your digital assets, make payments with a debit card, track your cash flow, and more, all on one seamless dashboard. No banks, no unnecessary middlemen, just a smarter way to manage your money with blockchain technology. Plus, join our affiliate program and earn rewards for sharing the future of finance. Sign up today for free using the QR code or link below. Trustify, take back your financial freedom.
Yeah. Thanks for that amazing insight, and from someone who hasn't experienced it, it sounds intriguing to get to trauma, because I think I agree, everyone is carrying various versions of trauma, but in their own life, whether it can seem small to others, it's bigger to yourself, because it's your real lived experience. Who's it not for?
The first people that I will say it is really not for is woke, politically correct, responsibility avoidant people. And I mean it. And you know, I thought, hey, it's for everybody. Everybody deserves healing and whatnot. And I welcome people that were like that in some of our retreats. And it was a nightmare for the team and for those people, because anyone who considers themselves a victim of their circumstances is going to have a hard time with ayahuasca, because ayahuasca is going to show us how we played a role in the life that we have created. You know, and people come and they say, there's a fine line there, which is, well, when you're a child, it's not your fault. Sure, it's not our fault, but as adults, it's our responsibility to take what happened and do something with it. But beyond that, ayahuasca may show us, beyond this body, beyond this mind, may show us the soul that we are, and how, in many ways, and this is very hard for people to understand, we chose the exact parents, the exact family that we had to arrive into, and the exact trauma and pain and agreements that we had to go through in order to evolve. And so anyone who maybe they're heartbroken and they would love for this experience to show them, hey, poor you, they were the bad ones, you didn't deserve that, yeah, he's a narcissist, or that kind of thing, they have a hard time because, for example, my mom, she spent close to a decade almost hating my dad after the divorce. He was unfaithful. She suffered a lot. She was in a lot of pain, and she made herself sick. She went bankrupt. Basically, her whole life started deteriorating, and she blamed my dad for all of it. At one point, she was suicidal, and nobody knew it. She had written letters, goodbye letters for my sisters, for myself, and you know, it's a bit of a story, but long story short, one day she reached out, she was desperate, and I suggested to her, hey, you may try ayahuasca. And when she tried it, it took one night for her to heal herself from fibromyalgia that no doctor could cure, no matter where she went, to actually recover her health, her energy, and to turn her life around from being suicidal and depressed to being in love with life, and just her life has gone up since then. And the one thing that changed it all was that she was shown how she had created all of that for herself. The medicine showed her, it said, show her first, you contributed to your own divorce. You were not the perfect wife. Look how you were angry and bitter and controlling and nagging. Like, sure, he cheated, but how did you contribute to him cheating? And this is something that no one wants to hear, because it's like there's a clear guilty one and I'm the victim and there's this person to blame. And the medicine will come and say like, no, sure, what that person did, and out of integrity, but there was a role you played in that. There were red flags you avoided, you know, and in her case also, hey, now you're punishing yourself with your bankruptcy, with your health complications, because you really want to prove to everybody how your ex-husband was to blame. You even want to take away your life to have the ultimate upper hand and to have the final say on this conversation, right? So ayahuasca is not for anyone who is not willing to take full responsibility for their life, because it's scary, because it's every time that I've gone there thinking it's going to show me how I'm right, my wife is wrong, and I just need to be more patient. It shows me like, no, your mess is of your own creation. So that's first. And anyone who wants to point a finger usually comes out pretty disappointed or a little extra traumatized, because the wisdom they receive doesn't fit their very, I'd say, small ideas and understandings of reality. The second group of people is more on the people with severe mental health complications. So people that have bipolar or things around psychosis or schizophrenia. These things can be treated and can be cured, but they will require for someone to immerse themselves at least 6 months to a year in the jungle and live with the shaman, where they can be supervised for a long period of time and fed proper food, and most shamans today don't have the patience for that, and most people don't have the discipline or patience to go through those processes. So usually they just roll them out, because for someone to come to a retreat and go back, if they don't have a stable enough mind, they can break a little bit. It can show them a lot of stuff that maybe they're under-resourced to deal with.
It's yeah, it's an interesting one. You talk woke, you talk. Do you see that the wokeness of the world now just avoiding responsibility, full stop? Because it appears that's what pretty much said. It's, you take it away from ayahuasca, you talk about personalities. That's almost where we sit, isn't it? It's blaming, it's others, it's someone else's problem. There's no empowerment of yourself to change.
Yeah. And so there is that blaming, that projection, that idea that, ooh, my misery, my triggers, my emotions are for everybody else to control, to manage, to turn to. The other side of that, which is like, for example, in my tattoo days, I had a client that was a woman that had turned male, so she had he had his breasts removed, and I did the tattoo that covered the scar across the chest. And later on, years later, when I started organizing these retreats, he reached out to say, hey, like, I want to come. And in the conversation, basically, the reason that he wanted to come, and finally he didn't come because of the same reason. He said that he was afraid to find out that he had made the transition from the wrong kind of headspace, meaning that it was a reaction to pain that he didn't know how to manage. And then he wouldn't know how to live with knowing that he had kind of mutilated his body as a consequence of severe trauma that he had gone through. So on one hand, he was feeling like how I thought I would feel once I transition is not how I'm feeling. I feel quite off. And I need to heal that. But the method of healing may show me that maybe, I took a step that can't be reversed. So very often for people that, it's my experience, that have a lot of very mental ideas of what biology is. Ayahuasca is a plant, it's a spirit of nature. So it will show you your biology. It will show you the perfection of the bodies that we were born into. And it often shows us that the issue is in our mind and our silly ideas that we create about life, and how we can twist a perfect creation and think that somehow I was wrong in the wrong body. I was born in the wrong body. So it's not. So that's why I say also people that maybe follow that line of thought, it would be dangerous for them to drink ayahuasca, because they may realize, as many have, that they came up with ideas in their mind about what life was, but now this plant medicine is showing them really, really at an existential level what life is, the biology, the perfection of the cosmos that we're born into. And that doesn't fit these mental narratives that would rather say, hey, gender is an illusion and it doesn't matter what we're born into, and just whatever we come up with our mind can be right. That's not. Ayahuasca is pretty much, it confronts, it's the medicine of truth. So anyone who would rather keep their own version of truth usually suffers a lot, because the medicine is going to show no. And, and I'm the first person. I wanted to believe that a lot of my nonsense, that drinking was fine, that sleeping around was fine, and it brought all of these things up to the light and showed me like, no, all of that is out of pain, all of that is out of avoidance, all of that is trauma finding expression. That's not, it's like you've come with fancy packages, fancy wording around things that are actually unconscious and unhealthy. So that's why I say that the woke crew will have a hard time, most of them.
You touch on healthy divine masculinity and say that we're lacking in the world. Where's the real man gone, so to speak? Mm-hmm. What do you mean by that?
So a very clear expression of this, or symptom, is that when we think about love, when people think about love, everybody thinks about the motherly love, which is, when we think about love, we imagine this all embracing, everything's okay, I love you, you're perfect as you are, you're worthy, kind of feel good vibe. That's the motherly love, right? You can be a crook, you can be a criminal. As soon as you get out of jail, your mom's gonna have a warm meal for you at home, and you're still her little boy, because that's nature. Nature needs for women to embrace their offspring. But fatherly love is something that today's society actually rebels against. Accountability, discipline, boundaries, they're often experienced as, or responsibility. Very often, because there's so much shame, these are experienced as blaming, as punishing, as being controlling. The mother, maybe you're running around and you trip over, the mother comes, gives you a hug, and asks you, how are you? And I love you, and everything's okay, and you're safe with me. But the fatherly love comes and says, like, why did you fall? You were not looking where you were walking. You need to pay attention. Like it's this part that provides wisdom, truth. If we look around, almost every person that speaks in a way that is sharp, that cuts through the nonsense, every person, and I've met many great speakers. For example, a person that comes to mind is Jordan Peterson. That anyone that speaks in a way that doesn't have the wrapper of softness, of the lovey-dovey, compassionate kindness, but it's just truth, wisdom, accountability, responsibility, usually there's strong rebellion against. That tells us that we have a deep wound with the father, that mother love we all rally behind, but that the father love we reject, that we resist responsibility, we resist discipline, we resist accountability. So there's a history to this. I don't think there's specific people to blame, but actually when societies moved from being hunting gathering societies towards agriculture, there was a primal instinct in men that no longer found expression. And very often, if it didn't find expression outside, it started to find expression inside the tribe, within the family nucleus, within the people. So a lot of this energy that was meant to face the outer beasts in nature didn't have anywhere to go. So it started being maybe leaked unconsciously and started creating a lot of the wounding, pain. Then we move fast forward a couple 100 years, and then we realize that especially with the Industrial Revolution, there's a further disconnection between man and nature. Now putting man into factories, into tedious work, and in the disconnection from nature, we lost our rites of passage. If you go to an indigenous tribe, and some of these are extremely extreme and a little bit gory, but tribes in anywhere from South Africa to Asia to South America had a very specific experience, a very specific rite or ceremony that boys will go through when they were of age to become men. And a boy that had not gone through those or through that rite of passage was not considered a man. Some African tribes, they're literally sliced open hundreds of times. I don't know if you're familiar with that, the ones that have like the crocodile kind of pattern on their skin.
Yeah.
And it's like, and then they're bathed in the water where it burns. And I don't remember what they're given. They're given something to bite because the pain is so much that they're screaming. But only when they've gone through this rite of passage, then they're then allowed to sit with the men, to go hunt with the men, to make decisions and have a casting vote in their societies. Now this is extreme, but most societies had something like a vision quest, where At some point, men had to undergo a trial. In most cultures, it was casting the child out in nature by himself, at least for 4 days and 4 nights, without food, without water, where he had to understand, who am I? Who am I? No, not as a name, not as I'm the son of this person. But what's the life in me? And what's my purpose? What's my role? What's my vision for being here? Because they knew very clearly that if a man or if a boy grows up and he doesn't have a clear vision of how he is meant to be of service to community, he's going to become a leech, because he's still walking around with his umbilical cord in hand, plugging it into every woman or every institution, seeking to be fed, to be taken care of by others. And societies knew that, it's better that a boy goes into these spaces and dies and never comes back than he stays being an uninitiated man. On the other hand, the men that went, the boys that went and got clear about, this is my life, this is who I am, this is what I'm here for, they came and they were of service. And we've lost so many of these things that I believe are at the root of most men today being some sort of man boys. Like you see 20, I've seen 20, 30, 40, all the way to 60-plus-year-old men that still are very boyish in their behaviors. And because we don't know, when did I stop being a teenager? When did I become an adult man? What happened? There's no clear transition. And that's because society has stripped this away from all of our cultures. And I believe that if we don't have those clear rites of passages, then manhood gets lost. The idea of responsibility, the idea of carrying a burden for ourselves, for our tribe, for our family, the idea of embracing discomfort. And beyond that, the understanding that a boy needs to be taken care of by his mother and by everybody else because he's too little to fend for himself. And a man is there to provide, to protect, to now be of service. There has to be a clear shift between these two things. And because we don't have them, we have the mess that we find ourselves in today.
How do we get it back? Like you talk about tribes in various places of the world. I'm in Australia. I live in a capital city. There's, you say your tribe is your bunch of mates you hang out with, or trying to be masculine around. But how do we fix that? Because it's almost like the whole of society is made to push that down, suppress that man, so to speak, that leader. Because as we've seen over the last few years with a number of different things, whether it was COVID or we're seeing government overreach in different places in the world, Canada, Australia, the UK, it's an interesting dynamic to sort of fight back against that. And what's the step to that?
Yeah. So in a very practical way, fortunately, there are circles of elders, sprouting all over the world. I know in Australia, there's some places where people that are carrying the traditions or people that have learned from elders carry them. So more and more it's becoming accessible once again to find these conscious spaces where rites of passage, rites of transition, vision quests are being held all over the world as we speak. But more than that, starts with our own relationship to our masculinity. If to taking inventory, like being honest with ourselves and saying, like, do I carry any shame for being a man? Or is there any way in which I do not express my masculinity for fear of being disapproved, disliked, exiled? It starts there. And I would say the sense of leadership and service has to start also from, again, taking inventory of everything that is in my life, before saying, oh, I'm here to serve the world. Like, all right, how am I walking with my people? How am I showing up with my partner, with my friends? And beyond that, if traditionally men were providing and protecting, who are they providing and protecting for? Nature and women and children. So very often something that I ask my clients to do is to understand the mind is the masculine and the body is the feminine, and to just notice what's the relationship. There's men that are tyrannical with their bodies. It's like we're gonna wake up at 4 a.m., cold plunge, fasting, sauna, and the body can be screaming and it's just like shut up and just push through it, and type A, high performance, but eventually they burn out. There's other men that they're slaves of their body. Cheetos, pizza, drinking another beer. Today I don't feel like doing anything. I feel lazy, or I feel very emotional, so I drown in that. So to reclaim our masculinity, we need to reclaim a healthy sense of leadership from our mind to our body. Like, am I a good friend to myself, or am I just dragging myself around, or am I cracking the whip and punishing myself when I'm not being the man I would like to be? So in these little ways, we can start reclaiming that self-leadership, immediate leadership around me. And then, if possible, it's always useful to find men's circles, find places where we can meet elder, where hopefully we can be guided into these rites of passage, to have the memory, to have the seal where we're like, you know what, I'm committing to leaving my boyishness aside, and here we go into a new way of being.
Yeah, you talk about that divine masculine. If you started to do the work or on the journey to do the work, what is it that the divine masculine looks for in the divine feminine?
What is it that the masculine looks for
in the divine feminine?
I would say receptivity is the first thing. In indigenous traditions, the way in which they paint this metaphor is the sun is the masculine. It penetrates, right? The sun is not receiving; it's giving life force. The rays of sun, and the earth is the feminine, the mother. That's why we call it Mother Earth, not Father Earth, because it receives that light and it turns it into life. It turns it into something else. So the conscious masculine, what it's seeking, first and foremost, is receptivity. Number one. Number two is seeking softness, which is whenever there's two strong masculine energies in a place, there's a bit of a friction, because whatever you are, there's only space for one person to be leading that space. If I'm and it depends, if I'm with my accountant, I want my accountant to take the lead. If I'm with my family, I'm the one taking the lead. If and so on. But with our partner or with the feminine, we want that receptivity. We want for her to be soft. We want for her to be nourishing and real. And what that means is like one of the greatest gifts that women give to men, or a feminine woman can give to a man, is that her heart and her emotions are nourishing to him. And not only the good ones, but just her emotional ups and downs, the variety of her emotional waves serve the man. So a good way of saying this is, men are like the sailors. It's a skilled sailor, but he needs to collaborate with the weather, with the ocean. And the feminine is that ocean, and it can be an ocean where the waves are overpowering and where her emotions just destroy everything, where what she feels, she vomits and spits out and hurts in the process. And it's all about her just expressing herself without regards for who is in front of her. So that's toxic feminine, which is like very self-centered. Or it can be, it can be the wind and the waves that can dance to the tune, that making sure that we're not stepping on each other's toes and that we can move harmoniously. So a divine feminine woman is receptive. She's connected to her emotions in a conscious way. She's connected to her heart, and her connection to her heart usually brings a man into his heart, And the way she leads is in a much more subtle way. Like a flower leads the bees to it, but never through force. You just let go of the fragrance, and the pollen, tells the bees and the hummingbirds where to come. So in that way, the divine conscious masculine man is looking for a sort of oracle in his partner, because her emotions, if she's attuned and if she's healthy, will guide him, will show him where he's falling asleep at the wheel, where he's being unconscious. It would be a very magnified mirror to where his work lies.
You talked before about trauma. We often hear a lot about victim mindset. What has the potential for that bitterness, that victim attitude got for us if we don't fix it?
So let me see if I understand your question. What happens if we don't fix that?
Yeah, like the blame game. Like we often see, we talked about before, it was, you talked about ayahuasca, where the woke probably don't suit it because there is the blame and no one wants to do the inner work.
Mm-hmm.
What does it do? What is the role of bitterness, the blame game, the victimhood mindset have on us if we don't fix it or if we don't do the work?
Yeah. So first, the role these things play is one of safety and self-preservation, because very often the truth can hurt and it will take work. So it's easier for me to live with the lights of my house turned off than to realize there's garbage everywhere and I may have to roll up my sleeves and get dirty, and that may take some time, and it may be nasty, and I may not. There may be some monsters hiding there that I don't want to look at. So the role of that the bitterness, the blame, they are protective mechanisms. Now, what happens in our lives when we do not do anything with this is it's actually quite tragic. And it's the first thing is, like let's say I cut myself and I just pretend that's not there. I think, I get caught up in saying, boy, I was cooking and you yelled at me, and I make a case on you, and I'm just going after you because it's your fault that I cut myself. But, I'm bleeding, but now I'm chasing after you, and I'm thinking all men are loud and all men are this and that. All right. But if I don't pay attention to this, if I don't grab some alcohol and sanitize it, which is going to hurt at the beginnings, it may hurt just as much or even more than the original cut. What's going to happen eventually is that it's going to get infected, and the infection is going to spread. And sooner or later, I'm going to come to a point where I am forced to face it. And this is the thing that people don't understand. Even if you blame, even if you play the victim game, even if you think it's not yours to deal with, sooner or later, the moment is going to come when your health, your emotions, your relationships, your mental chaos bubble up, and you're forced to look at it and do something with it and handle it yourself. What happens to people that just keep pointing a finger is that they never get to heal the wound. So life becomes a torture because now you have, rotting skin all over. Now you feel way sicker, and you're still thinking that the solution is found somewhere else. So it leads to a lot of misery. It's like a slow death. It leads to above all, one of the greatest pities is that if my pain is somebody else's responsibility or is in the power of somebody else to fix, but not mine, I will live completely disempowered, meaning that a better version of my life is never in my hands. And I think that's like being a slave. A slave has no choice for what they do with their life. It's based on their master's whims and will. It's like, okay, you know what? It's my master. I'm here under these cages, and that's it. And that's what people do when I blame somebody, when I'm somebody's victim. They hold the keys to my life. I'm somebody's slave. Because if I'm waiting for an apology, for acknowledgement, for somebody to say I'm sorry, or somebody to say, yeah, it was my bad that you felt this way, for someone to take responsibility for my emotions, I postpone my own life. I leave it in somebody else's hands and in the hands of someone that may not care at all and may never show up in the way that I think I need them to. So that's what happens. Just it leads to a lot of bitterness. It leads to very ugly relationships. Very hard to date someone who thinks the other one is always wrong. It makes for a lot of trouble in business because, well, in business, if anything, you have to take responsibility for more people, especially if you're an entrepreneur now. You're not only taking responsibility for your mistakes, but your employees' mistakes and sometimes your clients. So, these people end up struggling a lot emotionally, mentally, spiritually, financially, and romantically as a result of not being willing to look at the wound, understand that it's my wound. Maybe I didn't create it. Okay. But it's mine, it's on my body. So it's for me to fix, it's for me to sanitize and do whatever is needed so that it doesn't spread.
You touch on the spiritual side, how it can help or hinder us. The other bit would be the addicted side. So you touched on it briefly, the man who wants to do the training, do the ice bath, protein shake. It's almost like that obsession. How dangerous can that be?
Oh, I've met men whose lives have been consumed by that, whose marriages have been destroyed by that. 9-figure entrepreneurs whose I've worked with one that came to a retreat center. His son was a drug addict, like multi-millionaire man, and then sometimes he had to drive around to search for his son under a bridge somewhere. 80, 90-year-old kid. As a result of the absence of having a father, of having that guiding energy at home. So even when he came to the retreat, the mornings he's like running up the mountain so he can catch a call, and it was very hard for him to unplug. But very often, for most men that are like that, and I identify because I've been like that in the past. There's a part of us that feels like we need to justify our worth or our life. That being useful is a way in which we justify our right to be alive. So basically, a lot of most high performance is shame, is functional depression. Grandiosity, which is usually what many men like this find themselves with, like, I'm the man, I'm the best man, and I kick ass at the gym and in business and in my relationships, and this a quest towards grandiosity. Like people don't understand that grandiosity is the other side of depression. It's the same coin, because depression is like, my life is worth nothing, why bother? Grandiosity is feeling that your life is worth nothing, but trying to prove yourself wrong, or trying to prove everybody else wrong, trying to convince yourself through your achievements that actually you're worth something. So trying to perform so that maybe the world can reflect to you and tell you like, hey Warren, hey Nicolas, you're good enough, you're great. But that never comes. We become hungry ghosts. So because what we want at the end of the day is not so much like, if we're playing the game of more, there will always be more. And back to the question of spirituality, we're counting more. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we want more and more and more and more and more. But there's a part of us that doesn't want more. It wants all of it. We cannot count our way to infinity. We want to connect with the part of us that is one with all of it. Call it the creator, God, nature, the universe, whatever that is, the creative force. That's part of that pool. But we want to go at it in little installments, in little steps. It's never going to happen. So in many ways, a lot of this greed and this ambition, it's an expression of a natural part of our soul, but misdirected. It's like, I just want to become a bigger man in my business, in my relationships, in my muscles. But actually what I'm aching for is to feel my heart, my soul expand, to experience a larger portion of life, I just don't know that maybe I can tap into that without having to spend 16 hours a day behind a cell phone or a laptop.
Do you think we're seeing more of that now? And the only reason I ask is because, yes, social media puts it more in our face, where people who, like you or I, have had our story of feel like you're flying, bring you back, get kneecap, bring you back down to earth. You have a bit of a spiritual awakening, and then that side of people where they go, oh, spiritual, I'm not religious. Well, that's not what we're talking about. You're talking about an evolution of yourself. Or is it a case that it's the environment now, where whether it's light, bringing a lot more awakening to people, we're now realizing what we thought was great from that lifestyle of I'm going to grind, I'm going to make more money, I'm going to buy a house, I'm going to be rich, and I'm going to have all the accessories. Do you think we're in a case now where it's actually being forced on us in a way to have our breakdown, hit rock bottom, and then live our authentic self?
I think so. I think it's a gift. Every man I've met who breaks down, if he's courageous enough, he always breaks through and finds actually a different part of himself, a more authentic version of himself. And there's many men that realize that, oh, all I built was trying to please or prove myself to others, trying to be validated, trying to be the man. But actually the life that I wanted to live was a different one. And yeah, I feel that more and more we're being invited to reconnect to our truth. And in many ways, technology has made it so easy to compare ourselves with other all multi-billionaires are on Instagram. You can see their jets and how they live. And I think, I don't think that's so bad, in the sense that sometimes, not everybody, but sometimes we have to chase our own tail for long enough until we realize that it was all a silly thing to do to begin with. So sometimes we have to explore that, and technology makes it very fast, very easy for people, entrepreneurial people, to build a lot of money, scale, do things very fast, and burn out very quickly as well. I also feel that the disconnection with nature that most of us live with contributes to that. We have all this energy, but we're not grounding it. We're not moving with nature, and suddenly it leads to all kinds of disease or internal issues. So yeah, to your question, I think that life, evolution happens through negative feedback loops. We do something, we do a lot of it, and then we start facing the negative consequences, and then our life starts to understand, oh, it's not in that direction. Let me readjust. And then we go like that. And I feel that we're in a time where the negative feedback loops happen very fast, where mental health, I don't remember the statistics, but they are actually worrying. Things like 2 out of 4 children have expressed that they have like mental health complications, in the States at least. That's very worrying. A child, what does a child have to worry about? Leave aside the adults. And in many ways, what this is pointing towards is that we're living in a way that is out of harmony. So nature is forcing pain upon us. And pain is a gift, because pain is what shows you that when you cut yourself, what pain forces you to is to slow everything down, to stop and pay attention. That's the role of pain, to force us to be present when nothing else worked. So when nothing else works, suddenly we're forced to pay attention to something that is out of alignment. And if we pay attention, we may grow from it. So yeah, I feel life is handing a lot of pain for all of us today. And with that, a lot of presence as the possibility.
Yeah, there's opportunities to grow. You talk about finding God. What do you mean by that?
let's see how to articulate this. There is an energy that flows through all of creation. Scientists agree with it. Quantum physics has proven it, that we are all just, they say there's just one thing vibrating all kinds of different frequencies, and we're all made out of the same atoms and whatnot. At the core of life, there is an intelligent energy, a creative force that created us and has created everything. Finding God, for me, is the experience, not the thought, but the experience of connecting to this force. In my case, I was an atheist until I drank ayahuasca, and I had an experience that I could not, where it was undeniable. No matter what anybody tells me for the rest of my life, I had a direct experience of the Creator, and I was sobbing for hours and crying tears of grief, of joy, of grace. But I realized that all along, this is what I was missing, what I was looking for, and I knew that everything I had done in my life to cause myself pain or others was because I was disconnected from this creative force. So finding God is not about being happy, because sometimes the way to God comes through grief, through sadness, through loss. But it's about understanding that beyond our mind and our body, there's more to life. And being able to understand what that more is experientially, like as a direct experience, as a felt experience, not as an idea, not as a thought, not as something that we read from a book. And it's essential, because I believe this, that until a person has touched this dimension, has made contact with God in a very profound way, that person will keep seeking for happiness in all the wrong places. That person will keep thinking that more money, more women, and more loving partner, more whatever, is going to make them happy. And the moment we realize, actually, those things don't really matter. This is what truly matters.
Yeah, it's a self-help model, isn't it? It's you look external for all the answers when you're willing to confront it are internal. Jump forward. Once you are, I'm not sure if everyone's ever fully healed, but once you're a long way into your healing journey, how easy is it to see in others what you potentially used to be? Is it something that confronts you?
So, well, first to your comment, the self-help and self-development industry, it's all in like, how do we make this package better? It's like, how do I become a bigger man? Spirituality is self-destruction. It's like, how can I remove all that I think I am until, because I cannot count my way to infinity, but I can count back to zero. That's much easier. That's a limited journey. Yeah. And if I make it back to that nothingness, I will find what is left in me when I've taken away all that I think I am,
it's all the masks, isn't it? Strip the masks away.
Mm-hmm. If you remove the mask, eventually you'll come to your truth. So you can often tell what, this is my experience, the right path for me is always one of, like, it needs to be destructive to some degree, not in a negative way, but it needs to peel away my own truth. So it can be painful, because it's we're attached to our mask. We think we are our mask, and that's the painful thing. Now to your second question, yes, I see myself in others, and to be honest, at the beginning I used to be very judgmental, because I carried a lot of shame for whom I was. And there was one day that I was moving things in my home, and I found some old paintings from my tattooing days. And I had made this exhibition it was like an erotic art exhibition. So there were paintings of semi-naked women, and like they were not vulgar, but they were very sensual, and some of them a little sexual. And as I was organizing my home, I found them, and I felt kind of ashamed. I felt judgment towards that part of myself. So I remember laying them with the painting facing towards the wall. So, I don't want that energy in my house because I'm a man of God now and I'm a pure being and blah, blah, blah. And as I was organizing my home, I came across this tiny little Bible that some preacher had handed me probably years ago on the street, and I just received just out of politeness and never opened. And just for fun, before I threw it out, I thought, okay, all right, God gave me a message, and I just open it in a random place. And I was not expecting anything. It was more like an internal joke. And the place where I opened it and started reading, it brought me to tears because it said, I don't remember the exact words, but it said something about how dare you say you love the fruits if you despise and villainize the roots that fed them. And I'm like, oh, this is deep. And then I realized that, I was judging the Nicolas that was lost, that was an addict, that was drinking, that was extremely compulsive around sex, not understanding that version of myself was the one that was dealing with all the shit that he had to, all the manure that would later turn into the nutrients to have fruits to be shared with other people. So when I meet people that remind me of that, or that I feel are still living lives that are very unconscious, and by no means I am a fully conscious, fully awakened person. I have my shadows, and but when I recognize, when I'm in the presence of someone whose pain is evident, whose unconsciousness is evident, what I understand is that it's perfect where they're at, and if they're still there, they probably have not marinated long enough into the consequences of their own actions for them to arrive to enough pain to truly do something about it. Meaning the chicken is half baked, so it's not my job to pull it and say, hey, come out of your suffering. No. You need to cook, and you need to cook fully. And if you don't cook fully, you may rob somebody from that growth. So I try to look at people with understanding. I was there, but also understanding that this is also perfect, and this is part of the journey. And all right, they're in the phase of their life where they're dealing with a lot of the shit, a lot of the fertilizer, which means that if they're courageous, if they're humble, if they ask for help, they could very quickly turn that into sweet fruits, into flowers.
Yeah. How important are boundaries in that journey?
What do you mean boundaries with?
Well, putting up your boundaries. Obviously, you're someone going on your journey. You talked about before your evolution and drinking and all of a sudden, and then all of a sudden you're starting to grow. You're starting to awaken. You're starting to grow your consciousness. Then you have your boundaries to keep, to say that, hang on, instead of sticking with the old just because it's a friend who's been loyal for 20 years, if you outgrow them, it's important probably to recognize the boundaries you need to make because of that, because of your growth. Otherwise, you could find yourself being pulled back into the old you.
So boundaries are an interesting thing because, for example, how many boundaries did you need when you were, let's say you were 4 years old, you turned 5 years old, and you had some shoes that no longer fit you? Did you have to draw boundaries about, I'm not gonna put my feet into these shoes again? Unlikely, right? It's just no judgment either. These shoes serve a purpose. They may have been your favorite shoes with the lasers and the lights, and there may be some grief, all right, I'm letting go of the fun kid shoes, and now I'm taking more of them adult, but older kid shoes. So when it comes to boundaries, there's two things. I think they're useful, but only at the very beginning. Like when you plant a seed, if you don't make a fence around it, somebody can step on it, an animal can come and eat it, so we create a fence, not because we hate the deer or the chicken or the neighbors, but because we love the seed and we love what it represents and what we have planted. But once the seed has turned into a big oak, into a big tree, there's no need for defense. If anything, defense needs to be removed because there's people that could benefit from the shade, from the fruit, from what the tree has to give. So, in my grandma used to tell me, if something like, if you have your ass made out of hay, don't come close to the fire. And I believe that if we don't trust ourselves enough to not revert back to old habits or ways of being, then some distance may be useful for us to ground ourselves into this new version of who we are choosing to be. But when change has been embodied, boundaries are unnecessary. Like there's like people who are trying to stop drinking, so they need to like push away their drinking friends. But if I'm no longer a person who drinks, I don't need to push them away. They may invite me. I may see them. Hey, how are you doing? And the moment they like, you want to drink? I'll say no. And if I don't like the space, I just don't hang out with them. Or that's it. I don't need this to draw these lines. But if I don't trust myself enough, then maybe a little bit of distance can allow me to experience sober life long enough so that I understand that actually this is more in line with who I am. So boundaries are essential at the beginning, but they're training wheels, because boundaries are very often reactive to our environment. You see something I don't like, so I'm going to tell you, Warren, you don't talk to me like that. And that's kind of reactive, versus being is emanating. If I embody self-respect, self-love, there's people that I still do cage fighting in my late teens, early 20s. And I remember one of our instructors was this man, like this very short Filipino guy. And he was, you will never imagine that this guy was a mixed martial arts teacher. And the guy was violent and whatnot, but you could feel it. This is a guy that you looked at him, and even though he was very tiny, you will never mess with him. On the other hand, there were other classmates or guys who were training who were big, tall guys, but whose way of being, you could tell they were there because they were fearful men. They were a little timid and insecure, and you could feel that even if you're smaller, you can kind of push them around and tease them and whatnot. And I think that's the difference. I tell people, if your shoes are full of shit, you don't need a mosquito net. You need to clean your shoes. Like if you want bees and hummingbirds.
Yeah, that's bang on.
Yeah, if you want bees and hummingbirds and beautiful butterflies, you gotta exude fragrance. So the mosquito net is the boundary. The fragrance is the emanation. Now, while we clean our shoes, probably useful to put up a mosquito net and do the work. But once it smells nice, the mosquito net is unnecessary because life takes care of the rest.
Appreciate your time. Late your day in Canada, Nico, and early my time here in Australia. If there's people who would like to reach out and get in touch with you, and who have taken something from this podcast and are starting on their awakening journey, how do they do that? Obviously, you're on Instagram. How other ways can people contact you?
Yeah, if people feel curious about condensing 10, 15 years of therapy into a few nights, ayahuascacolombia.com. That's our retreat center. We often have people from Australia joining us. We have a couple in the next retreat coming all the way from there. And that's it. Other than that, in Instagram, @NicoCanon_, that's where I post the most often, and a lot of free resources over there as well.
Well, I appreciate your time, mate. Thank you very much. We could talk for hours. We've got an hour now, and I feel like I've got through half of my questions. So maybe there's a part 2 down the track. But I do appreciate your time, and thanks for joining us on the Ballsy Show.
Thank you, Warren. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to The Ballsy Show. We appreciate your support. Please like, subscribe and share this episode to keep the vibes going. Before we wrap up, a shout out to Trustify, the game-changing Web3 app that lets you seamlessly manage your crypto, send funds and spend on the card, all without banks or middlemen. Sign up for free today using our QR code or the link below to take control of your financial future. Stay tuned, the next Ballsy Show episode is about to drop.